What if everything you were taught about the Mass and was wrong? What if the very customs and traditions we hold sacred, those rituals that have shaped our lives for centuries, were not what we think they are? What if they were once hidden in plain sight, a mystery buried by time and perhaps by design? Think about it. For centuries, we've gathered in churches, recited prayers, raised the bread and wine. But have we truly understood what we're doing? The Mass, a custom as old as the Church itself, is so much more than just tradition. But what if it's not just about ritual? What if it holds a deeper secret? The customary Mass, what is its true significance? Why do these centuries-old practices still hold such powerful sway over our lives? And more importantly, are we missing something? Maybe, just maybe, the truth has always been right there in front of us, buried in plain sight, waiting for us to uncover it, and perhaps it's time for us to seek it out. Don't forget to like and subscribe, and tell us where you're watching from in the comments below. Join us as we dive into this journey and uncover the truths you've never been told about the Mass. Stay with us. For centuries, the customary Mass has been the spiritual heartbeat of the Church, the rhythmic pulse that guides millions of souls in their journey toward the divine. It has been the cornerstone of our faith, the ritual we return to again and again. But is it really just a tradition? A set of rituals passed down through the ages? What if there's something more to it, something hidden beneath the surface of the rituals we've come to accept without question? The Mass, as we know it, is far more than just the repeating of prayers or the solemnity of a church service. It is a doorway, a connection, a divine communication that stretches across time, drawing us back to an ancient truth. From the first prayer uttered in the early Christian catacombs to the grand ceremonies held in majestic basilicas, the structure of the Mass has remained remarkably consistent, but it wasn't always the same. Over time, the rites evolved. What we see today is the culmination of a process that spans centuries, shaped by political power, theological debates, and the need for unity in a growing faith. But in every version of the Mass, one thing has remained unchanged: its power to unite the divine and the earthly. The Mass is not just a ritual to be observed. It is a communion, a union between the faithful and the divine. It is a sacrifice, yes, but also an offering of love, a moment where heaven touches earth. In that sacred moment, time itself seems to slow down. We are invited to step beyond the ordinary, into the presence of God Himself. And yet, what is truly happening during the Mass? Are we aware of its true significance, or do we simply follow the rituals out of habit? The liturgy, this sacred action, was carefully crafted to reflect a theological truth. It is not mere ritual. The Mass has always been a sacred act that connects the human soul to the very heart of the divine. It serves as a reminder that through Christ, we are all made one with God, united in spirit, despite our earthly limitations. But why then have so many forgotten the true weight of these rites? Why do we recite the prayers without fully understanding the depths of their meaning? For those who truly understand, the Mass is an eternal conversation, a sacred dialogue between humanity and the divine. It is a living prayer, woven into the very fabric of our existence. The liturgy was not designed merely to be observed. It was meant to transform us, to lift our hearts and minds to the heavens. The faithful, through this ancient act, were meant to partake in something far greater than themselves. It was an invitation to reach beyond the physical, to enter the spiritual realm. And yet, for so many, the true meaning remains shrouded, obscured by centuries of ritual and tradition. Perhaps it is time to rediscover what lies beneath the surface of the Mass. To ask the question, what is it that we are truly participating in? And are we missing the deeper truths that have been concealed in plain sight all along? What if the Mass, as we know it, is more than just a tradition? It is a key, a doorway to understanding a divine mystery that stretches back to the beginning of time. Throughout history, the Mass has been a sacred bridge between heaven and earth. But in the rush of modern life, how many of us truly stop to consider its divine origins? How many of us really ask the question, what are we partaking in when we kneel at the altar, when we take that first breath of incense, when we hold the consecrated bread in our hands? In the earliest days of Christianity, the Mass was a humble act, a quiet prayer whispered in secret. But as the Church grew, so did the rituals. The Mass became a unifying force, an anchor for the faithful, binding them together in a shared expression of worship. Yet even as its outward form became more elaborate, the question remained: was the Mass still connected to its original purpose, or had it become something more? The structure of the Mass, its language, its actions, its sacred moments, was always designed to align the soul with the divine. But have we lost sight of what it truly means to partake in this holy act? The liturgy, as it was passed down through the centuries, was not just a performance. It was an invitation to transcend the ordinary and enter into the mystery of God's love, mercy, and judgment. In every movement of the Mass there is an invitation to witness the extraordinary in the midst of the ordinary. From the opening prayer to the final blessing, each word, each gesture, is intended to elevate the soul. And yet we've grown accustomed to the rhythm of it all, the repetition, the comfort of tradition. We've become so familiar with it that perhaps we've forgotten its power. The Mass was never meant to be just an empty gesture. No, it was an act of spiritual transformation. Every prayer, every word, every movement was designed to bring us into deeper communion with the divine. The very act of taking communion, the body and blood of Christ, was intended to make us partakers in something far beyond ourselves. But over the centuries, these sacred rituals were transformed, not just by the faithful, but by the power of the Church itself. The Church in its wisdom preserved the Mass for centuries, a living tradition passed down through generations. But as time passed, certain truths were buried. The rituals became more complex, and in the midst of it all, the question remains: what is the true purpose of the Mass? What are we really doing when we kneel before the altar? And perhaps, more importantly, who are we truly worshiping? In the early centuries, debates raged about the nature of the Mass. Was it a true sacrifice? Was it merely symbolic? Over time, as the power of the Church grew, so did its influence on the Mass itself. New traditions were introduced, old ones were modified, and what was once a simple act of communion with the divine became a complex web of ritual and ceremony. But in all of this, did we lose something essential? Perhaps the answer lies not in the ritual itself, but in the meaning we invest in it. The Mass was never just about performing actions. It was about encountering the divine. The prayers, the hymns, the sacraments, all of it was a means of drawing closer to God. So why is it that we, today, often fail to understand the true weight of what we are doing? Why do we go through the motions without considering the profound mystery that unfolds in front of us? For some, the Mass is simply a tradition. For others, it is the heart of their faith. But for those who are truly searching, the Mass holds the key to understanding a divine mystery that has been passed down through the ages, hidden in plain sight. The truth is this: the Mass is not just a ritual. It is a divine invitation, a call to deeper communion with God. It is time we rediscover what was always meant to be. It is time we open our eyes to the hidden truths of the customary Mass and see it for what it truly is, a doorway to the eternal. What will you choose to see? A tradition or a mystery to be uncovered? The Mass is waiting for you to step through the door. In the silence of the Mass, in the stillness of the altar, lies a profound question. Are we truly present in the sacred moment? Or are we simply going through the motions, repeating words, performing actions that have long since lost their true meaning? The Mass, in its earliest form, was not about grandeur or ceremony. It was about simple communion, human beings coming together to share in the body and blood of Christ. It was an invitation to be one with the divine, not in a grand building, but in a humble space where the faithful gathered to pray, to remember, to experience the sacred. But as the centuries passed, the Mass grew. It grew in size, in ritual, in tradition. The simplicity faded, and what was once an intimate communion with God became at times a performance, a display of power, authority, and control. And yet, even in this complexity, the power of the Mass remains. Perhaps it is not the outward form that matters most. Perhaps it is the spirit in which we enter the Mass, the intention with which we approach the altar. What is the true power of the Mass? Is it in the ritual? Is it in the tradition? Or is it in the transformation it offers each and every soul who comes before the altar? The Mass is more than a ritual. It is an invitation to encounter the divine. It is not just a memorial of the Last Supper. It is a participation in the heavenly banquet. The bread and wine become the body and blood of Christ, not just in remembrance but in the present moment. And in this moment, we are invited to step into eternity. To partake in the Mass is to partake in the divine mystery. It is to come before the throne of God, not just as a spectator, but as an active participant in a cosmic drama that has unfolded since the beginning of time. Perhaps the greatest secret of the Mass lies not in what is visible, but in what is unseen. It is not the physical bread and wine that transform us. It is the power of God, acting through the Mass, that touches our hearts, our minds, our very souls. We come to the altar not just to receive, but to be changed, to be made holy, to be made one with God in a way that words can scarcely capture. For those who truly understand the Mass, it is not just a tradition. It is not just a performance. It is the living, breathing presence of God among us. It is the doorway to the divine, a mystery that we can never fully grasp, yet one that calls us to come closer. And as we come, we are changed. What is the true meaning of the Mass? It is a question that will echo through the ages. But perhaps in the silence of our hearts, in the stillness of our prayers, we will find the answer. We will understand that the Mass is not just a ritual. It is the meeting place between heaven and earth, the place where time stands still and the eternal comes alive. And so I ask you, my friends, what will you find in the Mass? Will you see only the surface, or will you search for the deeper truth that lies within? The Mass calls to you. It has always called. And now, it is time for you to listen. In the stillness of this sacred space, a question lingers in the air, unanswered. What is the true significance of the Mass? The world has often reduced it to a mere ritual, a tradition to be followed, an act to be performed. But I tell you, my friends, this is only a fraction of its meaning. The Mass is not simply a service. It is the ultimate divine encounter, the meeting place where time and eternity converge. When we step into the Mass, we are not merely observing a ceremony. We are being invited into a profound communion, a communion with God, with Christ, with each other. It is a moment in time where the veil between the earthly and the divine is drawn back, if only for an instant. It is a sacred act that connects us to something greater than ourselves. Look back through history, to the early days of Christianity, when the Mass was not yet a magnificent spectacle. It was a humble meal shared by believers in the shadows, under persecution, in secret. But even then, it held the same transformative power. It was never about the outward ceremony, but about the divine encounter, the true communion between the believer and the Creator. As the centuries passed, the Church grew, and with it, the rituals of the Mass became more elaborate. The sacred acts of communion, the body and blood of Christ, were offered in grand cathedrals, under gold-framed altars, amid the splendor of the liturgy. But did this grandeur add to the mystery, or did it obscure it? It is not the opulence of the building, nor the beauty of the vestments, nor the intricacy of the rituals that define the Mass. It is the sacred presence, the divine mystery that flows through it. And in every word, every gesture, every prayer, we are invited to be transformed. Transformed by the encounter with God, transformed by the grace of the Eucharist. But what happens when we forget this? What happens when we become distracted by the external, and miss the miracle unfolding before us? To truly participate in the Mass is to allow it to change us. It is not a passive act. It is an active participation in a mystery that stretches beyond time and space. It is a participation in the life, death, and resurrection of Christ Himself. And when we come before the altar, we are invited to unite ourselves with His sacrifice, His love, His eternal truth. In that moment, as the priest raises the bread and wine, something extraordinary happens. The world, for a brief moment, stands still. The physical and the spiritual converge, and in the breaking of the bread, the body of Christ is made present. We are invited to receive Him, to partake in this eternal meal, and in doing so, to partake in His divine nature. The Eucharist is the summit of the Mass. It is not just a symbol, it is the reality of Christ made present to us. And in receiving the Eucharist, we are not simply remembering Christ's sacrifice, we are entering into it. We are made one with Christ in that moment. We are united with His suffering, His love, and His eternal promise. And yet, even with this sacred mystery before us, we must ask ourselves, how often do we truly grasp the magnitude of this moment? How often do we stand before the altar, distracted by the noise of the world, and fail to see what is truly happening in that sacred space? The Mass is not just a tradition to be observed. It is a divine invitation. It is a moment of spiritual transformation, a call to step beyond the earthly and enter into the eternal. It is a mystery that we can never fully comprehend, yet it is ours to experience, ours to live. And as we come to the altar, we must ask ourselves, will we truly see? Will we allow this sacred encounter to change us? The Mass calls us to something greater. It calls us to be partakers in the divine mystery. Will you accept the invitation? Will you step through the door into the eternal? And so we arrive at the ultimate question. What is the true nature of our faith? What is the Mass truly asking of us? You see, the Mass is not simply about participation in ritual. It is about an encounter, a divine meeting. The altar is not merely a place where bread and wine are transformed. It is the very point where we, as fragile human beings, come face to face with the eternal, where the fleeting nature of our lives intersects with the unchanging eternity of God's love. What we often fail to realize, my friends, is that the Mass is not merely about the externals. It's not just about the grandeur, the vestments, or the magnificent architecture. No, it's about our hearts. It's about coming before God in a spirit of humility, reverence, and awe. It's about allowing the sacred mystery of the Eucharist to transform us, body, mind, and spirit. For each person who kneels before the altar, there is something unique happening. It is a personal encounter, a moment when time ceases to matter and the eternal becomes real. The bread and wine, which are symbols to the world, are transformed into the body and blood of Christ. And as we partake, we become one with Him. We are drawn into the mystery of His life, His death, and His resurrection. But this sacred act, this encounter, is not passive. It requires us to actively open our hearts to the divine. It calls us to step into the mystery, not with mindless repetition, but with understanding, with awe, with a deep desire to be changed. The Mass is a divine invitation to enter into the life of Christ, to embrace His sacrifice, His love, and to allow that encounter to transform our very beings. Each prayer spoken, each action performed holds profound significance. And when we open ourselves to it, when we truly understand what is happening, the Mass becomes more than just a duty or an obligation. It becomes a moment of true communion with God, a moment that transcends the earthly and touches the eternal. What the Mass calls us to is not just participation in a ritual. It calls us to encounter Christ, to be spiritually united with Him. In every Eucharistic celebration, we step into His passion, His sacrifice, His triumph over death, and we are invited to allow that transformation to flow through us, to be renewed in body and spirit, and to take that divine encounter into the world. The transformation that begins at the altar is not meant to end when we leave the church. No, it is meant to extend into our lives, to shape the way we think, the way we speak, the way we love. It is meant to change our hearts, to open our eyes to the beauty and the suffering of the world around us. The Mass is not just an isolated moment of worship. It is the beginning of a journey that takes us from the altar to the world, from the divine encounter to the reality of daily life. And so, my friends, we return to the question, what is the Mass? It is the moment we are invited to partake in the divine mystery. It is the moment we are transformed, made holy, and sent out into the world with a renewed heart, filled with the love of Christ. The Mass is not simply a tradition, it is a divine invitation, an eternal encounter that calls us to step into the mystery, to become partakers in the very life of God. So, what will you choose? Will you see the Mass as a mere ritual, or will you embrace it for the mystery it truly is? The invitation is before you. Will you step forward and accept it?